Welcome to Human Machine Relations. This is the podcast that explores how people and technology are shaping the future of work, creativity, and communication. If you listen to it, the first episode of this series was really more of an introduction to this topic, and it featured snippets from the interviews of two of my first guests to this podcast. So in the introduction episode, I explored in depth how AI is affecting the role of the content expert, particularly in technical PR and marketing. This episode is the full interview with Simon Krelle. He's a senior leader in the B2B deep tech agency world with experience that spans client services, media relations, business development, and content strategy. Together, we unpacked what's actually happening behind the scenes as AI becomes part of everyday workflows in the agency environment and the strains that this can place on the client-agency relationship in PR. Let's take a look at what Simon thinks. Right, so to kick us off, can you briefly just tell us a little bit about your career path and background, how you ended up in this career?
Yeah, okay. So I started out on an apprenticeship actually in a company that made electromechanical equipment. So I spent 5-6 years in the design office while also studying for formal electronic and mechanical engineering qualifications. And that led into a career in kind of tech sales and business development, and then ultimately into agency world, B2B deep tech agency world, where started out as a account manager and content creator, and then gradually evolved into kind of senior leadership roles, which is where I am now.
Oh, and aside from the misfortune of previously being my line manager, which I'm sure you're not fully recovered from, one of the responsibilities of your COO role more recently was managing an agency content team. So if you think about how the team operates now compared to, say, 3 years ago or a typical content team, how has the advent of AI changed things?
Yeah, I mean, significantly and changing quickly, I think is the kind of overall view of it, I'd say. I mean, I think some agencies have gone all in on AI, but I do think that the better agencies are taking a more measured approach in the way that they use AI and kind of scaling it in where it has benefits, but without degrading the kind of differentiation that they have and the kind of secret sauce that agencies give to their clients. And I think, to build on that a little bit, human creativity, I think creating written content is often underplayed in terms of the importance of human creativity, the ability to tell a story. And even if we're writing about fairly dry conservative engineering topics, it's still important for the reader to be interested and inspired by what they read. And I don't think presently that AI can do that on its own. So consequently, I think it's right now for AI to be used as a very useful assistant for a content creator, to build familiarity around maybe topics they're not familiar with, to give them a kind of first words on the page, maybe, that they should then edit and optimize. But yeah, certainly not to rely on AI completely in terms of generating content. I think that's a big mistake right now.
So augmentation as opposed to automation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, the picture is changing so quickly. We see these, new tools coming on the market every day, every week, every month, and the tools that are there evolving. And, we're all continually surprised about what AI can do. So the landscape is changing really quickly. So we have to keep revisiting how we use AI, but without forgetting that, content is something that people read to be, to some degree entertained, even in deep tech B2B, as well as being informed.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of talk about making AI making content production faster. But in your experience of managing a B2B technical content team, does it actually save time, or does it use human time up in effort in a different way instead?
Well, I think for original content, for that first piece of content creation, it saves only a minimal amount of time. I mean, it expedites the desk research. I mean, if we're looking at a topic and we're researching around it to create a piece of content, then desk research would often involve a kind of Google search or reading documents, etc. And that still needs to be done to some degree, but a lot of the work can be done by really AI prompts that then extract good information from an LLM.
Which you still have to check anyway, right?
Yeah,
In
for
case
sure.
it's
Yeah,
hallucinating.
yeah, absolutely. I don't think that you can write about a topic blindly, i.e., not knowing anything about that topic. You've got to build some knowledge about, if it's your client's technology, so that you can spot errors. Yeah, incorporating something from an LLM straight into copy without validating it is a really dangerous and silly thing to do. If the client spots it, then you lose all credibility as an agency for sure.
On the topic of clients, do you think that they would be tempted to take more content creation tasks in-house with the help of AI, or might be likely to do that in the near future?
Well, I think certainly more and more clients are contemplating doing that. I mean, they see, the cost of having an external agency create content as a bottom line cost, in cost pressure times, and that gets noticed. So I think, I've seen a few clients and companies where they've looked to take content creation in-house. Honestly, in general, I don't think it works because they're typically leaning on AI so heavily and also asking people whose day job isn't creating content, so maybe product managers or people working with the engineering design function at the sharp end of their company, to also create content. They don't have the time, or they don't understand how to write compelling content. They can get the facts down, the specs and everything else, but going back to the human creativity thing, again, the human creativity in agencies, good agencies, is underplayed to be able to tell, get an interesting storyline and then do it in a really good way. So I think, I've seen a few false starts and where companies have taken in-house, sort of rub their hands together at the amount of money they think they might be saving, but then finding that they're producing no content or content that isn't really up to the mark.
Yeah, and I think also that the difference is that agencies know how much how much time human beings are spending on editing, fixing, checking, and all of that stuff. Whereas that in-house is not logged, it's not monitored really. So I think that there's kind of a misconception about how much time it actually saves. And also, I think, if subject matter experts, because you've got one thing in a technical B2B agency, you've got engineering expertise, but you've also got the PR and the marketing expertise. And I think that the PR and marketing expertise is the thing that's kind of being devalued with the LLMs, and saying, well, we'll just get our subject matter experts to create this with the help of AI. But I think that what they don't know is the human in the loop. These technical subject matter experts don't know what makes a good story. They don't know what editors are looking for, and they don't know what converts leads. So do you think that's something that they have to find out on their own and then they come back, or?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's a case, maybe sometimes you need to let them do it and then maybe come back with their tail between their legs at a later date. But you're right. Yeah, I think there are multiple facets to communicating technology to end audiences to drive business. And yeah, the technical understanding is one, the ability to tell a story is another. And now, over recent years, the number of channels and places that your audience goes to find information to do their job of design has broadened so much. So there are different ways to tell a story. We've seen things evolve from the humble press release and a technical article as being pretty much the landscape, to now have YouTube, we have webinars, we have blogs on site and in trade media. And so the trade media is still important, but it's a smaller part of the overall marketing pie. So you've got to put the right information told in a compelling way in the right place at the right time. So there are many elements, and an in-house team, a client's in-house team, can't do most of those unless they start hiring people who would be the people that be in the agency anyway. So
Exactly.
it ends up costing them the same, and they might not fully utilize them. So yeah, I totally agree with the view that you've got there.
And then when it comes to like looking at the future of the content specialist and that role, it's kind of a little bit uncertain as it stands at the moment. And I've I've, in my personal experience, heard a lot of dismissive reactions to AI outputs, especially at the beginning when ChatGPT first came on the scene in 2023. If you look at how far they've come in just 3 short years, um, it's almost impossible to dismiss the possibility that they might one day become just as good as a human writer. What's your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean, if you follow the trajectory they've taken, or the steepness of the line that they've followed to date, then yeah, where it might be in 3 years is frightening or exciting, depending on which way you look at it. Really, I think.
Bone
Um,
chilling to me.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, whether that steep um, climb will continue or not is hard to tell. I mean,
Yeah.
my gut feel is that it will continue to progress at a very quick rate, but I don't think it'll be as quick as it got off the ground.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's hard to predict, but I think for the foreseeable future, this ability of all the things that I've described in terms of the value of the agency, in terms of telling stories to drive whether it's leads or revenue, whatever it might be, or brand, is going to remain. And a content specialist who understands technology and can come up with creative story angles is going to be a key part of the whole landscape.
Do you think that the in terms of that in our specific industry, you've got people, a mix of people. So some people that come from the engineering background and other people who come from the journalism background, like myself.
Mm.
And do you think that one particular background will have more inherent value, or I don't know, with the way that like I said, the more generalist speciality of PR and marketing seem to become a bit devalued. Do you think that this role survives in its current form over the next 5 years? Does it evolve? Does the engineering bit become more important? And what's the future then for people who entry level who want to come in? Because it's now AI is doing that entry level job. If we're looking at it as an assistant, so then we don't need assistants anymore. How does that
Mm.
work?
Mm. Well, I think, to your first point, um, I think there's still going to be a requirement for people who understand engineering and can create content. Um, I mean, I've heard people in our sector describe someone who's an engineer who can also write as a bit of and understand marketing as a bit of a unicorn, because
Yeah,
stereotypically engineers are kind of interested in engineering, they're not interested in marketing. So to get people that do both is quite unusual still.
very rare. Yeah.
And I think on the point about journalists and how they work, I mean, you and I have both seen and experienced journalists who move into agency life, and agency content creators who maybe move to journalism. That's left less often, and it's always an interesting thing, I think, to see how journalists take to it, because typically clients want journalists to write about them, so they're nice to them. When they come agency side, then
It's a whole new ball game.
it's a different ball game. Yeah, and to some degree, notwithstanding the agency giving counsel to the client, the agency writes what the client wants them to produce rather than the freedom that journalism has. So sometimes that transition works, sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't sit comfortably with the journalist. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
And then the junior roles.
Sorry, yeah, junior roles. Yeah, I mean, the one you hear about a lot with AI is the legal profession, isn't it? Where they say that the
Mm,
paralegals can't learn the basics because AI can do that for them.
hmm.
Um, I think that's an extreme case, probably, and it definitely holds true. I can see it's a big problem. I think less so in our industry, but still a problem. I think,
Well, it's still an aging industry, isn't it, Simon?
yeah,
If you
yeah.
look at us, we're all a bit silver-haired, you know.
I was going to say, don't look at me when you say that, but it's true. Yeah, absolutely. And but I think if you've got people who go through some form of education where they've learned engineering at university or wherever, then they do learn that engineering, and so that's still part of what they do.
Hmm.
So I think it's a little bit more protected. But yeah, definitely. I mean, in any situation where you can use AI to do part of your job, then by definition, you're not going to learn that part of the job in the same way. So it's definitely a thing across every walk of life. And we need to be wary of that. Yeah.
Let's just move on as well to more like the governance issues, and you touched on it earlier on about the trust issue of around AI use. So if we look specifically at the client agency relationship and also the agency freelance writer relationship, do you believe that how do you think that the use or even suspected use of AI affects trust, and how might you have seen that in practice?
Well, I think the first thing is that there's got to be clarity in both directions, both from agency to client and agency to freelancer, and to internal content creators as well within the agency. So being upfront and honest about how you use AI is vital. And I think getting ahead of the game is vital too. You don't want to have a situation where you send a piece of content to a client and they come back and they say, I suspect you've used AI to create this. You know, what's your response to that? And that you fumble around.
Then
It's
you're on
better
the
to be on
back
the front
foot.
foot. Yeah, you've got to be on the front foot and say, you know, our stance is we use AI if it is this. We use AI as a desk research assistant, but the content is in the main created by our in-house content creators. So I think there is a risk of mistrust, and I think inherently, because AI is so kind of in the front line at the minute, then clients, it's quite reasonable that clients might say, oh, that piece of content looks like it's AI, and start
Yeah.
challenging, either from a value of the content point of view, but also from, are the agency now expediting this but still charging me what they used to charge me? So I think it's important to have guidelines and probably documented guidelines, and because of the speed of AI evolution, those guidelines need to be revisited probably every 6 months at least. And then in terms of freelancers, again, I mean, as a freelancer, I'm not casting aspersions on freelancers, but if you receive a brief to write a piece of content, you think, okay, I can do this in 2 hours rather than 4 if I use AI. The temptation is probably to use AI more than you should, you know, to be more efficient in terms of your content production. So again, I think it's important for the agency to make clear its expectations in terms of AI use.
Yeah, and also to maybe I think that with freelancers, it's a difficult one because there's no obligation on agencies or on clients to inform freelancers of what's happening within the organization. And I think it's happened to me a lot of times that you start doing work and you think, oh, this is a regular thing, and then all of a sudden it goes crickets, and nobody actually tells you what's going on because maybe they feel bad, but it actually, I think that it's difficult to have those real honest conversations between the agency and the freelancer, because even sometimes when agencies sort of have a problem with a freelancer's writing, they won't necessarily say it. They won't say, oh, hey, there's a problem. They'll just stop using you, and you have no feedback, and you don't really know what's going on. So I think that there's an element there that that makes it worse with AI, because there's always, like you say, there's a lot more opportunities now to sort of not give work to freelancers. And at the end of the day, they're sat there thinking, what's going on? Is it me? Is it you don't know.
Yeah. Well, certainly I think when when I was running the content team recently, my view of freelancers was that it had to be a partnership. It's a bit cheesy, but a partnership relationship rather than a customer and supplier. That's the way you get the best out of it, and you need it because also you're briefing the freelancer to give them the best chance of telling the story how it needs to be told. And also, I think another fundamental thing is, and going back to what I said earlier on, the optimum route to a really good story is human creativity coupled with AI, human creativity and knowledge coupled with AI assistance. Pure human creativity is sometimes falls short because The technical understanding isn't there of the subject matter. Pure AI is falls short every time, in my opinion, because it draws from what's out there already. It isn't able to create story angles. And I think as well that any content creator should never view content creation as a process and a tick box. They should be, proud and have pride in what they write, just in the way that someone who's writing a novel would do, or a piece of a piece of literature, as opposed to a piece of content that it has a purpose behind it. So I think if they've got that pride, and I think most of the freelancers I come across do, then that has a lot of importance as well.
The other thing that makes it very difficult is that writing or the creative art of writing is subjective. Like every other art form. If you have a piece of art, some people will hate it, other people will love it. And it's very much the same with writing and writing styles and how people approach things. And I think especially where you have very technical subject matter experts doing reviews, they might look at a piece of content and say, well, that's not the way that I would have written it. Okay, but you didn't write it. So and I think that sometimes AI becomes the tool to flog people with. It's like an easy thing to just accuse somebody of using AI when it could be perhaps the furthest thing from the truth. It's just that the style doesn't match the expectations of the reviewer, and wherever you get that mismatch, it becomes then a contention, a point of contention.
Yeah, no, I think there's a couple of things there. Firstly, I think you often see it where you kind of use the phrase that a writer is in the groove with the client, and that means that they're writing in a style that you found that point that the main reviewer, the client, likes the style of the writer, and you've kind of got there, you've nailed it. But when that doesn't work, then you can end up sort of second guessing, and there's nothing more frustrating when, as a writer, you've created what you feel and is a decent piece of content, and it goes to a reviewer, a client, and the changes that they say it's an awful piece of content, and you see the changes they're suggesting essentially are different ways of saying the same thing. And it's not as bad as if you look at kind of visual creatives, so images or video or whatever, then everybody's got an opinion. That blue should be darker, or that should be whatever it might be. It's really easy to have an opinion. And to a lesser degree with written content, it's the same. So it's a tough one, and often when you get a writer who's worked for a period of time with a client, and they're getting approvals without any changes, etc. For them, for whatever reason, you're required to change that content creator. That's a point of high risk, because although that new content creator may be very good, are they writing it in the way? So we found in the past where you say to the new writer, right, okay, this is what was getting passed through before. I know you've got your own style, but if you can try and mimic this, then we stand a better chance of a smooth transition. It's a tough one, because it is a creative and it's subjective, as you say.
Yeah. And I mean, do you think that there's a stigma around using AI? Not to say that you're using AI as your final output, but just to say that you have used it as an assistant or a part of the work or whatever it may be, that because of that, people then hide how much, or there is a tendency to hide how much they're using AI to generate content?
I think there is a stigma, yeah, I do. And I think particularly of engineers, because I think engineers are quite proud of the fact they understand engineering. But if you work for an agency, then you're working, say, you're creating content for maybe 4 or 5 different clients in different technology areas. There's no way that even if you're a very capable, qualified engineer and content creator, there's no way that you can understand the technology of those 4 clients to the depth that the client does. So if you're going to create stuff that does the job for them, then you're going to have to get additional knowledge from somewhere to do it. And I think AI is really good for that. And again, with a huge caveat is that you challenge and check and validate everything that AI tells you, and you don't just regurgitate what it's telling you. You actually understand what it's saying. And but I do think there is a stigma attached, because engineers are proud, and they don't want to be seen to have gathered knowledge from an artificial source.
Yeah, and even writers, normal writers, are proud, aren't they, of what they do, and I think also there's an element of people being under intense time pressure as well, and especially in-house roles or in agency environments, there's so much time pressure to get everything done. And, so having that streamlined workflow of AI helping to do some of the research or outline some bits or understand bits of how it works and so on. But then, like I said, everybody has their pride.
Yeah. And I think writers, and I've seen this in agency world where agencies get big, is that writers like to be left to be creative, and they don't like to be restricted or used as commodities within the agency. And I think that's fair, but obviously when an agency, all it's selling is its time, you've got to have some control over that. But if you just have someone feeding a writer a brief about, I don't know, some hydraulics and pneumatics one day, and say, right, you've got 3 hours to write this, and it makes it a commodity product and a commodity process. And then, they say, okay, your next 3 hours of your day, you're going to be writing about, capacitors or something like that, something completely different.
And you're just expected to bang it all out.
You can't treat these people like a machine. And I think that writers and creative people in general get upset if they're treated in that way and regarded in that way, because they're not. But at the same time, they've got to understand that time is money. That's the only way.
Can't be Don Draper,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and that brings me to the next point quite nicely. It's like the paradox between leadership teams, especially in-house environments, telling their own team to use AI to cut costs and increase productivity. But then if you're paying an agency or a freelancer and then you suspect that they might be using AI, or that they disclose it that they're using AI, then they have this sort of, oh, what do you, how are you doing this? Isn't what I pay you for. You should be charging us less. Have you encountered that?
Yeah, I mean, I think with freelancers, I mean, the traditional way to pay freelancers is a cost per word. So using AI definitely presents an opportunity, to improve the quality of the content, but more importantly, expedite the production of it to some degree. So maybe that model needs to change. I mean, the trend I've seen in the last few years is that freelancers are trying to charge more for content, but AI, in theory, should maybe help bring that down, or at least keep it at the level that it's at, maybe. And then in terms of clients' side, clients are, if they're not doing the extreme thing of taking content in-house, they are saying, okay, well, you've told us your AI policy. It sounds like, particularly with repurposing existing content, you can make some significant time savings. So does that mean that you'll be charging us less? And what does that look like? So it is a bit of a slippery slope, but and I think agencies have got to be honest about it. But there are many more things in a kind of diverse marketing landscape where that budget can be spent. So we have to be honest about providing the counsel to say, okay, the content, maybe repurposing content especially, can be less time consuming, so less cost. So that frees up budget to do, use it as a blog post or create a script for a video or whatever it might be. So we've got to face up to these things and deal with them.
Yeah, and I think also it's that certain misconceptions, like, for example, that AI is going to save a huge quantity of time, whereas they maybe don't understand the cost, the labor cost of the human in the loop, and the responsibility that we would have as editors, if not pure writers, to edit that content, check it, curate it, make sure that it's correct and that everything is the way that it should be, especially when it's meant for editorial purposes. So maybe there are a lot of misconceptions that need more open conversations or more transparency around. What's the misconception that you find yourself having to correct when clients think about what AI does in the content production process?
Well, I think just that it means that it can be done much more easily with less skill. Less skill actually, controlling it, and that's the misconception. I think
Absolutely.
they think it just brings down the level of ability that someone needs to produce content, and I don't think that's true. I think AI, as we've said many times, is a very useful assistant to produce better content and probably more quickly, but it's still got to be a story that's told.
If you could give every client one piece of really honest, succinct advice about how they should be thinking about AI and content, what would that takeaway be?
Take your agency's guidance on it. would be one thing. I think be optimistic and excited, but be cautious. Be careful how you approach it. You can approach it in a measured way, and as an agency we can help you do that, and we'll justify why we're doing it, and let's revisit it on frequently to see how it's changing. I think that would be, that's more than one piece of advice, but you get the general gist of it.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thanks very much to Simon for the open and frank discussion. He certainly raised a lot of important points. For me, perhaps the biggest takeaway is that in a world where content can be generated quickly, quality, trust, and storytelling skills still remain valuable as a way to stand out against the AI-generated slop that's flooding our feeds. If you enjoyed this podcast and you wanted to hear more conversations like this, make sure to follow Human Machine Relations on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Hajira Amla, where I share more insights on these types of topics. And if today's discussion got you thinking, next week's episode is one you won't want to miss. I'll be releasing the full interview with electronics engineering content expert Stuart Cording, where we go into even deeper into the intersection of engineering and PR. We look at the perceived value of communication skills versus engineering qualifications and how AI might be affecting this balance. Until then, thanks for listening, and remember, the future isn't just about what machines can do, it's about how we choose to work with them. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.